It was late afternoon on June 15, 2012 on a paradise island in Thailand. The place was full of tourists, people everywhere, that live music coming from somewhere. And in a hotel nearby, right next to the sand, a staff member was passing by with her cleaning cart on the second floor. She stopped in front of a room, knocked on the door, got no answer, so she knocked again, called out, said she was from housekeeping but nothing. Then she took the card she had with her, the MasterCard, swiped it on the door, unlocked it, and went in. And what did she find inside that room? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you in today's episode. I'm Marcos Campos. Welcome, everyone. Every week there are at least 3 episodes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss episodes. If possible, become a member, leave a like, comment, or emoji. That's the message. Now for the facts. At the beginning of the night on June 12, 2012, 2 Canadian sisters were at a hotel on Phi Phi Island in Thailand. Their names were Noémi Bellinger, 26 years old, and Audrey, 20. Both were from Quebec. They were university students and were there on a trip. The idea, actually, was a trip through Asia to celebrate the end of the school year before going back home and starting the whole routine again. They had just arrived from Vietnam, meaning they were there in Thailand after already traveling through Vietnam, and Thailand was supposed to be their last stop before heading home to Canada. As soon as they entered the room, exhaustion hit them right after arriving from their trip. Especially for Noémi, after all, that backpacking trip, you know? Airplanes, boats, a lot of heat, everything piling up. She just wanted to take it easy for a while at that moment. But even so, before lying down, she did something that had already become kind of a habit. On that trip, she went to check the bed where she was going to lie down. So she lifted the sheets, looked at the mattress, the corners, everything to see if it was all right, all clean and such. Nothing out of place. Then she threw herself on the bed and stayed there, just enjoying the air conditioning. As for Audrey, her sister, she didn't think twice, okay? She didn't want to rest. No, she went to the bathroom, started getting ready, and she had a reason for that. When they were still in Vietnam, they met 2 tourists, and they ended up getting along well. These tourists, according to the sources, were actually Brazilian. But hold on, I'll get to that. So, they ended up getting along with the guys, talked a lot, and since they were also going to Thailand, they made plans together, to meet up again, have a drink, talk, that sort of thing. So, since the Brazilians were also there, on that island Phi Phi, the plan was for them to meet up that night. Well, the 2 sisters were in that mood, One was really excited, the other just wanted to relax. But at night, both of them were going out, and their parents were already worried. Noémi then, to calm her parents down, always talked to them. She made it clear that she was taking care of her younger sister, that she wouldn't let anything get out of control. And Audrey accepted the situation, kind of like the older sister there, right? Being her babysitter, in quotes, in that situation, Noémi lying down, Audrey already getting ready, Noémi called their parents, like she often did throughout their whole trip. But before calling, Audrey came out of the bathroom and told her sister not to call, right? Because it was already the middle of the night in Canada. So she came out yelling, saying, "No, don't call now, you're going to end up waking both of them up, right? You'll scare them since they know we're traveling and all that." And then her sister said, "Oh, okay, you're right? Because of the time difference, let's leave it for later." So Noémi agreed, put her phone aside and said, "You know what? I'll get ready too." And so, a little while after that, the 2 of them left the hotel and headed to the beach. It didn't take long for them to find those Brazilians. They were in front of a bar, right there by the seaside, each one holding a bucket full of ice and drinks. The girls thought that was strange and asked what it was. Then, the guys explained that it was a common drink around there, very popular, among tourists and locals too. But they couldn't say exactly what it was, just that it was strong and everyone drank it. Check this out. Audrey didn't think twice. She grabbed a drink there and downed it right away. But Noémi, in that situation, was more suspicious at first, but she started looking around. There, everyone was drinking that, so she said grabbed one too and started drinking. And just like that, the hours went by, and they went by really fast. They drank, ate some local food there, stopped by the sea, danced while a disc jockey was playing some music and all that. The whole vibe was really cool, and as time went by, The two of them ended up getting a bit drunk. The Brazilians did too. It was already a little past 1 in the morning when Noémi decided to go back to the hotel with the guy she was with before leaving. However, she said to Audrey, "Hey, I'm leaving. Do you want to come with me?" Audrey said, "No, I'm not going now. I'm going to stay a little longer here. Go ahead. Everything's fine. It's all good here. As you can see, there's no danger. I'll be there soon." Well, Noémi might not have let her sister stay there. But since things were already happening, that tense atmosphere, everyone was kind of drunk, I think she just looked and said, "All right then, I'll wait for you there." She also ended up trusting the guy who was with Audrey. So Noémi said goodbye, turned her back, and went to the hotel. And that's how their first night, let's say, of their trip to Thailand ended. Noémi, guys, got back to the hotel a little after 1 in the morning. As we saw, right? She was accompanied by this supposed Brazilian guy she was having a fling with. The building's security cameras recorded the two of them together in the sisters' room. Inside the room, Noémi went straight to bed. She was already pretty drunk, tired too, so it didn't take long for her to pass out. A few hours later, around 4 in the morning, Audrey also came back to the hotel, but not alone. She arrived accompanied by the other Brazilian, the guy. She had spent the whole night dancing with him on the beach. The security footage also shows all 4 of them entering the room at different times, okay? That is, first Noémi, then Audrey, but towards the end of the night, from that point on, guys, no one else was seen entering the room. So, around 6 in the morning, the cameras recorded the Brazilians leaving the room together. They left the hotel right after that. Then the sisters stayed there the whole next day. No one saw Noémi or Audrey leave that room. They didn't show up for breakfast, didn't go out for a walk, nothing at the hotel. That didn't raise any suspicion at that first moment, because the island in Thailand gets a lot of young tourists. And sometimes, these young tourists end up drinking too much the night before and stay in their rooms hungover all day. So that first day went by unnoticed, and the second day went by unnoticed as well. The third day too, it was only on the night of June 15th, 3 days later. After that early morning, a cleaning staff member found the silence strange. He knocked on the door, saying he was from housekeeping and all that. No one answered, so he took the card and went in. And seconds after that, this hotel staff member ran down the hallway screaming for help. Inside that room, Noémi and Audrey were lying on their beds, covered by sheets. Both of them were motionless, and there was vomit around them. The police were called immediately, and around 9 o'clock at night, a team led by Lieutenant Colonel Hachi Sambum arrived at the hotel. That investigator, the lieutenant colonel, was very experienced in the region and had already been informed about what he might find there. Even so, the scene drew attention. The two sisters had been dead for at least 12 to 20 hours, according to the estimated calculation. There, at first glance, there were signs of a struggle. There was no sign of forced entry, and the room was in order. At first glance, then, the hypothesis seemed to be simple alcohol intoxication. It was a tourist destination known for parties. That vomit there spread around them reinforced this hypothesis. But upon examining the bodies more closely there, the detective noticed something that didn't quite fit with that simplistic explanation of intoxication. Because there was dried blood on the gums of both sisters and also under their fingernails. That wasn't normal, and at that moment the investigator realized he needed to understand exactly what had happened in the hours leading up to that dawn.
The tourists who died were lying normally in their beds. Their belongings didn't seem to have been disturbed, and there were no signs of a struggle. They seemed to be sleeping normally, as if they had just fallen asleep.
Well, from that moment on, the main question the police needed to answer was who the two had been with in those moments leading up to their deaths. The hotel employees were the first to be questioned. That's when the timeline, let's say, started to become clear. On their first night in Thailand, the sisters left the hotel early in the evening. So, around 1 in the morning, as I mentioned to you, Noémi returned to the room accompanied by a man. After a few hours, around 4 in the morning, it was Audrey's turn to come back. She was also accompanied by a man. These two men stayed in the room until around 6 in the morning, left together, and after that, no one else entered that room. The footage from the cameras confirmed exactly this sequence of events. There was no doubt then about the times. The problem was something else. No one knew who those two men were until then. The police released a statement asking for help to identify these men. The information spread quickly, mainly because it involved foreign tourists found dead in one of Thailand's most famous destinations. It didn't take long for a response to come. The two men were Brazilian, the same ones who had been or were seen with the two girls on the beach that night. But there was a detail. They had already left Thailand. They were already gone. When the bodies were found, the girls had been there for 3 days. And this, of course, raised some suspicion, made people wonder. But legally, they could do that, right? Nothing was stopping them until then. And since, obviously, the authorities there don't have jurisdiction here, the case needed one. How can I put this? An international intermediary, in this case, Interpol. About a week later, Interpol managed to locate the two men and officially question them. According to the report, when they were informed about the sister's death, the two showed shock, genuine shock. They said that they didn't know anything and that they were surprised by the news. When asked about their quick departure from Thailand, they explained that the trip had already been planned, they already had tickets bought, and so on. They denied any speculation there that they were fleeing the place. They were also asked about the condition of the girls when they left the hotel around 6 in the morning. And they said that both of them looked very bad, nauseous, weak, as if they were feeling sick, or maybe a hangover, something like that. Just like they had been drinking all night long, Noémi less so until about 1 in the morning. I don't know if when she got to the room accompanied she kept drinking or something like that. They say she went straight to bed, but you can only really know if you were there, right? And during the investigation process, in that interview with the guys, a curious detail came up. The two Brazilians said that in the days following that night, they also felt kind of messed up, feeling sick. They spent days vomiting, stuck in bed, not really knowing what was wrong with them. They, of course, survived, but said they had never felt so bad in their lives. And when Sambam, that lieutenant colonel investigator, received this information, he started connecting some dots. Things started to make some sense in his mind. If all four had felt sick that night, they had drunk together, eaten together, maybe they had all been exposed to something, some kind of intoxication anyway. But the two survived and the two sisters didn't. At first then, in the detective's mind, maybe their bodies reacted differently to the toxin. I don't know, whatever it was, right, that all four of them ate? So things needed to be clarified, didn't they? With the Brazilians' account in hand, Lieutenant Sambam started working with a new hypothesis. If all four of them had stayed together that night, drank the same things, eaten at the same places, it made sense to think that they had all been exposed to the same substance. The difference is that for some reason their bodies reacted in different ways. As I said, the first possibility raised then was food poisoning. Then it happened. Thailand receives millions of people, tourists, every year. So it's not uncommon for a lot of people to feel sick, trying different food, things they're not used to. Some people get a mild food poisoning from eating something they've never had before, while others have a more serious medical condition. In more extreme cases, some foods can even cause severe poisoning, putting the person's life at risk. But this theory started to fall apart when the first toxicology reports came in for Noémi and Audrey's blood. The test detected the presence of a substance called N,N-diethylmetatoluamide, which is a chemical component actually used in insect repellents. This discovery caught their attention, of course, but it didn't completely surprise the police, the investigators on this case. In that region, it's quite common. A drink known to be popular among tourists, this beverage doesn't follow any fixed recipe. It's basically a business that in my time used to be called a pharmacy, where guys go there, mix all kinds of junk into something and sell it cheap, you know? In the case of Thailand, it's described as a mixture usually made with soda, syrup, actual medicine, you know, cough syrup and so on. Other substances, drinks, alcohol, a whole mix, and in some cases they even consume chemical components like this one. That's why I mentioned DEET. This drink, guys, is obviously not regulated or safe, but even so, it was openly sold at beach bars. Okay, here's a disclaimer, because I said, in my time, it was called pharmacy, just saying. For me, has anyone ever heard of this thing? This little drink mixed with all sorts of pharmacy stuff? Not that I drank that crap, okay? I've always been into beer, draft beer, never really liked those crazy drinks. Not much into spirits either. I'm not really into that. It's really just beer for me. Well, disclaimer made, let's move on. The police's conclusion, guys, after all this, was the following. The sisters supposedly drank an excessive amount of this beverage, which had an excessive amount of that N-diethyl metatoluamide stuff, and that would have caused them accidental poisoning. This theory explained a few things, right? It explained the vomiting, the fact that the Brazilians also felt sick, it explained why. It all started after a night of partying. And the police believed that that specific batch of this drink had been prepared with a much higher amount of this DEET. Then we don't know if it was on purpose or by accident. Who knows who makes this mix, right? Maybe the issue of intoxication, or rather poisoning, could also explain it, right? A bit of bleeding in the gums, under the nails, I don't know. 9 days after the bodies were discovered, the investigation was considered closed, so the official cause of death was actually recorded as poisoning by this substance. The bodies of Noémi and Audrey were prepared and sent back to Canada, along with the final report from the Thai police to the local authorities. That's it, the case was solved for the family. I don't even need to say it, right? Things were just getting started. When the news reached Canada, Noémi and Audrey's parents were already desperate. They spent days trying to talk to their daughters, you know, calling them and all that. Messages with no response, calls that weren't answered. And at no point did anyone from the Thai police get in touch to explain what was happening. The confirmation of the two's deaths came only through the media. Only after that did the Thai authorities contact the family to inform them that their daughters had lost their lives, and that the case, which was being investigated, was closed as an accidental death. According to them, it was poisoning caused by a drink, something like that. To the parents, that sounded like complete nonsense. What do you mean? 2 healthy young women died on the other side of the world, and no one told the family. The investigation was done just like that in days, hours, and everything was resolved. But a banned drink sold like that, and no one is going to investigate who made this damn drink. Man, it's bizarre. It's not good. So they started asking questions, but the authorities in Thailand didn't have the answers. If this drink was so common, why wasn't there any kind of warning for tourists like, hey, they sell poison here, be careful, okay? The authorities don't do anything. If all 4 drank the same thing, why did only 2 of them die? And why was the investigation closed so quickly? All of this, these were things going through the girls' parents' minds. Of course, this showed that the conclusion the Thai police wanted to give to their parents was completely meaningless. The family's outrage caught the attention of the Canadian press, and the case then began to gain national attention. With that, the Canadian government decided to intervene. Before the bodies were handed over to the family, they were sent for analysis. From one of Quebec's leading forensic pathologists, Dr. René Russell, her mission was quite simple, to confirm whether, in fact, DET had been the cause of death of the 2 young women. René performed a complete autopsy on the bodies of Noémi and Audrey, and the result didn't quite match the official version. No, okay, there were indeed traces of DNT in both of their bodies. But according to this forensic pathologist, it wasn't enough to kill someone. And there was no other detectable poison that could explain those deaths. For René, that didn't make any sense at all. If it wasn't the drink, and there was no other identifiable substance, then what exactly had killed those 2 young women? Let me point something out to you. There was no identifiable substance, but was there really no other substance? Why am I saying this? Just a few. I'm here thinking, with sources, voices in my head, why? Well, they stayed in that room for about 3 days, right? Afterwards, I don't know exactly how long it took until the bodies were transferred. For what, to Canada? A lot of time passed, guys. If this affected or not that secondary autopsy by the professional there in Canada, I don't know, but I assume it did. It's not good. What I know is that this professional from Canada, hired by the family, knew that the answer she wanted wasn't in those official reports. So then she needed to look for it on her own. Renee Russell wasn't convinced that this was an isolated case, so she started researching tourist deaths in Thailand, at least during that period, right? Previous years, similar cases, similar hotels, with vague reports and quick conclusions, you know? And the more she dug, the more she researched, the more unsettled she became. Between 2009 and 2015, at least 20 foreign tourists were found dead under circumstances very similar to Noémi and Audrey's case. Young, healthy, traveling, almost always after a night with no reports of violence, no clear signs of crime. In many of these cases, the official explanation was similar: sudden illness, intoxication, something that went wrong after a night of partying. But there were too many things in common to be ignored. The victims were usually found in bed. There were reports of vomiting, slight bleeding, and intense discomfort before death. And almost always the investigations were closed quickly, in a swift manner. Renee then began to suspect that the problem was not with the food or the drink. She started to look at something else unusual, I would say, at the environment. So she went back to the first reports of Noémi and Audrey's case and noticed a specific detail. At the time, it seemed totally irrelevant, but now, with this work narrowing down, focusing in, that caught her attention. As soon as they arrived at the hotel, Noémi and Audrey, do you remember that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that Noémi, especially, had checked the sheets before lying down? They seemed to be clean, in fact, they were, but there's always a but, right? I would say they were a little too clean, and you'll understand why in a moment. At that time, many hotels in the area were dealing with bedbug outbreaks. And to deal with that, some establishments were using illegal and extremely dangerous methods. Instead of calling companies specialized in this, they used pesticides on their own in the rooms, in some cases directly on the mattresses and sheets. One of these products used is a gas called phosphine, and this phosphine is highly toxic. It's used to kill insects and rodents. Exposure can cause vomiting, respiratory failure, damage to blood vessels, and death. In this case, I don't think so. I mean, the link is closing in, isn't it? No, it's not. And most importantly, it's hard to detect after the body has been exposed for a certain amount of time. Just watch. Renee realized that this explained almost everything. The answers she wanted were coming up with this substance. It explained the blood on the gums, under the fingernails, the sudden, extreme discomfort, right? Also the discomfort that the Brazilians felt afterwards because they stayed in their room for a while, but they stayed less time than the girls did. And then there's also the issue of organisms, right? The particularity. Everyone reacts in their own way. But that seemed to explain a lot, didn't it? Including, why didn't this substance show up in the secondary autopsy? Back in the early morning, all 4 of them had lain down on those beds. The Brazilians stayed a few hours and left at 6 in the morning. They were exposed, but in small amounts. Noémi and Audrey stayed there. They spent many hours there. It's not possible to know exactly when they lost their lives, but they kept absorbing that, and unfortunately, they didn't survive. This discovery by Renee Russell completely changed the way everyone looked at the case, didn't it? If Noémi and Audrey had been exposed to phosphine gas inside their own hotel room, then that wasn't an accident. An accidental poisoning there was the result of an extremely irresponsible and illegal practice. Spraying pesticide on mattresses and sheets is not allowed anywhere. The risk to humans has been known for a long time. I mean, just think about it. Wow, and they're tourists too, right? You go there trusting, sometimes you even pay a lot for it and say, no, I trust this place, but then there are these bastards who put you in danger, right? Even so, despite this pathologist's discovery, things kind of stayed in limbo. Nothing really moved forward. The official cause was still the same. There still hasn't been a reopening of the case. No one, not any hotel, nothing, no one was held responsible. The explanation from the Thai police was the same: accidental poisoning because of adulterated drinks. But if someone tampered with the drinks, that person should be held responsible too, right? It's bizarre, man. The phosphine hypothesis was never officially adopted, and this didn't happen only with Noémi and Audrey, okay? Other similar deaths, pointed out by Renee during her research, were also never thoroughly investigated. In many cases, the reports were closed quickly, without detailed autopsies or independent follow-up. Today, more than a decade after this case, the one involving the sisters, the case is still officially considered solved. Even without an answer that convinces the people who heard Renee's report, it's not really a feeling of abandonment for Renee. The case exposed a much bigger problem than just 2 deaths. And for those who follow this story to the end, there's a sense that something fundamental failed in a bizarre way. It wasn't just a night where they got lost in drinking. It was an irresponsible choice. Amen. We can't say it was a lack of hope or luck. It was a combination of negligence, silence, and convenience. Because think about it, guys, no one paid for this. So you're there, right, at a tourist spot which probably supports the whole region, tourism, right? Do you think there aren't any schemes behind all that? Also, this is just my own speculation, okay? But if you disagree, comment here. And if you agree, comment too. Because just imagine, people are going to say, no, that pathologist from Canada is totally right. She nailed it, hit the bullseye, she got it right. But now,
guys, we can't acknowledge that because otherwise, how are people going to visit us?
Right? It's kind of a weird path. It has the opposite effect, at least in my mind, right? It goes like this, because if they admitted, like, yeah, we made a mistake, we did a sloppy job here, right, to acknowledge these deaths, and then the cause of these deaths. Ms. Renee, please, let's reopen the case here. You become our assistant, and man, you give people a lot more credibility, don't you? At least that's how I see it, right? I don't know, well... And to wrap up, I'm sure there's someone out there saying, but what about the Brazilians? Look, guys, I researched a lot about these Brazilians, okay? I really looked into it, but I didn't find absolutely anything about them. What I found were posts on social media, on Reddit, on Facebook, saying that they were Brazilians, those tourists there. Posts also based on the video, including the one I used here as the basis for my script from Mr. Balin. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I pronounced his name based on his video. People are talking about those tourists, then a name shows up, Bruno and Guy, but I thought, like, I don't know if it's made up, if those names were protected in some way, preserved, right? Better saying, I don't know. So, I can't say for sure here who they are, if they really were, or if this was just presented there. Just to, anyway, add to the media coverage of the case. I don't know if anyone knows, comment here. But this case, guys, seriously now, it's so bizarre, man. It creates such a feeling of insecurity. Because it reminded me of the Mike Mansfield case. Do you remember that case? I presented it here in the 2024 season. If I remember, I'll leave it here on the screen. The end. This is about a boy who traveled to Malta alone. It was his first trip, if I'm not mistaken, alone, and he had a bizarre, really sinister death. If you haven't seen that episode, it's really worth it because it's one of those that takes your breath away. Because the way the boy came back home afterwards, his body, man, it's surreal. Well, that's it. Leave a comment and share your thoughts on our work today. Thanks for your company. A kiss from Ruivo. See you next episode.